Welcome back. It is a privilege to be able to welcome our next guest. His name is Kyle Shideler. He is one of the most formidable men I know in his area of expertise, which is homeland security, or I guess more pointedly, homeland insecurity. He's responsible for a project addressing these, well, several different facets of the problem of our homeland insecurity for our Center for Security Policy. As the director of our project, as a senior fellow of the center, and as a tremendous resource for our country, to the Congress, to the media, and of course to the rest of us. We're always delighted to have him with us here, Securing America. Hi, Kyle. Good to have you back.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me, Frank.
Kyle, one of the things that's sort of top of mind at the moment is evidence of what seems to me to be the unraveling of the rule of law. Specifically, in the aftermath of this deliberate and compromising leak of a confidential draft opinion by Justice Sam Alito of the Supreme Court about the so-called Roe versus Wade ruling and overturning it. We've seen the left that brought us the so-called Summer of Love 2 years ago once again reverting to its favorite playbook. Talk about what that looks like, what it means for the justices of the court and their families at the moment, and more broadly, what this portends for our society if it's not challenged and checked.
Sure. Well, one of the things I think people find most challenging is they ask the question, how is it that this chaos is so heavily organized? And the reality is that as you look into these things, you start to see some of the same players again and again. And it's an organized network. This is what they do, right?
Right.
They exist for the purpose of creating these street level actions, these street level protests to raise the profile of an issue to achieve a political objective, right? And there are a number of organizations that the left can turn to do this when they want to on whatever topic. So people said, well, it leaked on one day and then they had protests with color coordinated shirts a day later. Well, we learned from Politico that they actually held on to that leak for a while and probably spread it around a little bit to give it time. But then again, the leak was probably coordinated with the protesters to begin with, because, of course, putting pressure on the justices seems to be the whole point. And it's worth remembering when you see this kind of chaos, it's chaos for a political purpose. And then, so how does this work? Well, the left can turn to a number of groups that pre-exist, that they have worked with for years to do this sort of thing. One example is an organization which I wrote about recently in The Federalist called the Revolutionary Communist Party. Revolutionary Communist Party was established by a guy named Bob Avakian back in the 60s. He was a member of the Students for Democratic Society, so he goes way back when it comes to making this kind of street trouble. And we know from revelations by Project Veritas and from some of their Form 990s that this group, Revolutionary Communist Party, had a front group called Refuse Fascism, which received funding from George Soros, that did fundraising efforts with major donor Tom Steyer, who's a major Democratic donor. And these guys pump money into an organization like the RCP when they need street level action. And then the RCP has a number of hardcore devoted communist, some people even call them cultists, who are simply devoted to the cause that they can drag out to any protest on any topic at any time. And then these protests are then amplified by the media. They're treated as legitimate and real things that are somehow spontaneous rather than the pre-organized events that they are. And then they can get all manner of celebrity endorsements and support for these actions, as we saw recently, from example, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who tweeted out a instruction to her followers to attend a RCP-led rally in New York City. So,
And again,
this allows them to
RCP
build
stands
out.
for Revolutionary Communist Party. This is
Right.
sort of a clue as to who we're up against here. And Kyle, I mean, there's obviously lots of pieces to this, but just to cut to the chase, what you're talking about is, I guess, described in some circles as a color revolution that we saw firsthand did incalculable damage to our country back in 2020. Are you saying, based on your analysis of the groups involved and their methodologies and the support they're getting from some of the same people who in 2020 were encouraging them, not dissuading them, quite a number of whom seem to have positions of influence in the Biden administration at the moment, that we're going to see something akin to that kind of, well, Summer of Love seems absurd, but that's what it was called, street level action and violence and threats, not just to property, but to persons as well?
I think so. It's going to be time limited because they have two factors that they need to rely on. Either one, the intimidation of the justices in order to change the opinion that comes out of the Supreme Court, right, and that's going to happen relatively soon. Or two, enabling the currently Democratic-led Congress to push through some kind of legislation that would install essentially Roe versus Wade as the law of the land through the Congress. We know they need to do that fast because the midterms are not looking good for them. But I think we're going to see an increase in tempo. We're going to see an increase in activity and an increase in violence as we ramp up to those two main events. One, the announcement by the Supreme Court, and then two, the midterm elections. We've already seen the targeted attacks against crisis pregnancy centers in a number of states. We saw them in Wisconsin and Northern Virginia, and I expect we will see more of those as well because there's a lot of chatter on the web from various Antifa groups about targeting those kinds of pro-life organizations. Um,
And
you know,
churches, for that matter. I mean,
absolutely.
this is now open season on Christians. It seems more generally, not just facilities. Kyle, we have to take a short break. When we come back, I want to just drill down for a moment on what this means in terms of the court, the safety of the justices, and whether something really malevolent is afoot there, not just trying to affect their judgments, but perhaps their very lives. We'll talk about that and much more with Kyle Shideler of the Center for Security Policy right after this.